she buried their names, 2,500 names, written in ink on strips of cigarette paper, rolled tight, sealed in glass jars, and buried in the garden of a neighbor's house on Lekaryska Street in Warsaw. Pause. Every name belonged to a child. Pause. Every child had been taken out of the ghetto in secret, hidden in toolboxes, in potato sacks, in coffins, in the bottom of an ambulance, under a coat, beneath a pile of bricks. Carried out one at a time by a woman who used her job as a social worker to walk through the most heavily guarded boundary in occupied Europe, again and again, for 2 years. Pause. Her name was Irena Sendler. She buried the names because she believed the war would end. She believed the children would grow up, and she believed that when it was over, they would need to know who they were. She was right about the war ending. She was wrong about what the children would find when they looked. Warsaw before the war was a city of 1.3 million people. Roughly 1/3 of them were Jewish, scholars, merchants, doctors, factory workers, children who went to school on the same streets as everyone else. In October 1940, the German occupation drew a wall around a 1.3 square mile section of the city. Every Jewish person in Warsaw was ordered inside it. By 1941, more than 400,000 people were crowded into that space. Streets designed for a fraction of that number, with food rations the German administration calculated at starvation level. Deliberate, calibrated. The ghetto was not a holding place. It was a mechanism. Irena Sendler was 30 years old. She was Catholic, Polish, and employed by the Warsaw Social Welfare Department. Her job gave her something no ordinary civilian had: a pass to enter the ghetto on official business, to assess sanitation conditions, and the risk of typhus spreading beyond the walls. She had watched Warsaw change. She had watched neighbors disappear. And she had decided, with a clarity that would define the rest of her life, that the pass in her pocket was not a document. It was a tool. She did not work alone. That part is important. Sendler became a leader within Żegota, the Council to Aid Jews, a clandestine Polish resistance organization, and the only government-sponsored body in occupied Europe specifically dedicated to rescuing Jewish civilians. Pause. Inside that network, she built her own operation. She recruited social workers, nurses, tram drivers, priests, and ordinary residents of Warsaw, people who had apartments where a child could sleep, connections to convents, access to forged identity papers. At its peak, her network involved more than 20 people in the direct extraction work and hundreds more in the supporting chain. Every child required a complete reinvention, a new name, a new history, a new family, real or fabricated, a place to live that would not be questioned, and someone willing to stake their life on the secrecy of a child who was frightened, who might cry at night, who might say the wrong name to the wrong person. Pause. Sendler carried a list. She updated it constantly. The child's real name, their new name, where they had been placed. The list was the most dangerous object in Warsaw. If the Gestapo ever found it, every name was a death sentence. She kept it anyway, because the children would need it. Someday, she believed, they would need it. The methods were improvised, adapted, and constantly changed. Routine was dangerous. Pattern was death. Infants were sedated, a small amount of medication administered so they would not cry during the crossing. Then wrapped and placed in toolboxes, in the bottom of crates, inside ambulances with the medical supply compartments rebuilt to contain a child. Older children were taught their new names, drilled until the name came out of their mouths without hesitation. Taught which prayers were Catholic prayers. Taught what to say if someone asked. Taught not to ask about their parents where anyone could hear. Sendler herself walked through the ghetto gate carrying her dog, who had been trained to bark on command. When she needed to cover the sound of a crying child, the dog barked. A German guard heard noise and saw a woman struggling with an unruly animal. That was all. She made the crossing herself, multiple times, every week, for 2 years. The passage from the ghetto to the other side of that wall was the distance of a few feet. For the children who crossed it, it was the distance between two entirely different lives, and the end of everything they had known. Sendler did not take the children without permission. She went to the parents. She explained what she could offer: a chance, a possibility, a child placed with a Polish family or a convent, with a false name hidden. Pause. She could not promise survival. She could not promise the child would be returned. She could not promise anything except that inside the ghetto the odds were known. The deportations had begun. The destination was Treblinka. Pause. Some parents said yes immediately. Some parents said no. They could not let go, could not hand their child to a stranger, could not survive that particular amputation, even in exchange for a chance at life. Pause. Some parents said yes and then changed their minds and came back, and Sendler honored it. She turned around. She returned children who had already crossed. Because the choice had to belong to the parents, even when it meant the child would die. She later said that she never once judged a parent for their answer. Pause. She said it was the hardest part of everything she did. The Gestapo came for her before dawn. She had been betrayed, though by whom and in exactly what circumstances has never been fully established. They took her to Pawiak prison. The interrogation lasted for months. They wanted names. They wanted locations. They wanted the list. They broke bones in her feet and legs. They did not get the list. She had already transferred it. The names, all 2,500 of them, had been buried in glass jars in the garden on Lekariska Street before they reached her door. The Gestapo sentenced her to death. Żegota bribed the guards responsible for her execution. On the day she was supposed to die, her name was added to the official list of those executed. But she was driven to the edge of the city and released in the woods, beaten, barely able to walk, alive. She spent the rest of the war in hiding, in pain, continuing to work. When the war ended, Sendler dug up the jars. She brought the lists to Żegota's leadership. Efforts began immediately to locate the children, now older, living under different names, in convents and farmhouses and city apartments across Poland. Most of the parents were gone. The vast majority of the adults who had handed their children through the wire, who had made that calculation in a ghetto apartment and said, yes, take them. They had been deported to Treblinka. They did not come back. The children Sendler saved grew up knowing that someone had chosen this for them, that a woman had carried their name through the worst years of the 20th century and buried it in a jar so it would not be lost. She spent the decades after the war trying to locate every one of them. She never considered the work finished. Irena Sendler received almost no recognition for 4 decades after the war. In communist Poland, her association with Żegota, which had ties to the Polish government in exile, made her story politically inconvenient. She was not celebrated. She was not taught in schools. She was, for a long time, nearly erased. Pause. In 1999, a group of students in rural Kansas, researching historical figures for a class project, found a reference to her name in a brief newspaper article. They wrote a play about her called Life in a Jar. That play, performed first in a small American school, eventually traveled internationally and introduced Sendler's name to a generation that had never heard it. She was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in 2007. She did not receive it. Pause. She died in 2008 at the age of 98. She saved 2,500 children. She buried their names so they would survive. She endured torture rather than give those names to the people who wanted to use them for murder. And she said for the rest of her life that she wished she had done more. Pause. There is a kind of person who looks at what is possible within the constraints they have been given, a job title, a pass, a network of willing people, and a very small amount of time, and decides that the constraints are not the point. The point is what can be done anyway. Her name was Irena Sendler. Pause. Remember it.